All right, so we could do the money thing for the whole remaining time here and way longer than that. But I want to shift to something else, which you've said a couple times. You're not making a judgment call on the Democrats or Republicans. And as I said at the intro, I find you to be one of the few people that I consistently see calling out both sides. I see you get hate for it, and you just said it. It's like anytime you say something about Trump, the Hillary people get angry at you. And then, of course, the same goes the other way. Is this a new phenomenon? I know everyone, politics is about picking a team, but do you think it has gotten significantly worse this time around? Because even if I do make a joke, a Star Wars reference, Trump looks like Jabba the Hutt, then I have to make something about Hillary, or like it's really gotten crazy.
Yeah, I definitely think politics has become a lot more tribal. That's the term I use for it, which is it doesn't matter what we're fighting about. We're just simply fighting. And we have the parties have defined themselves almost exclusively as not the other party, regardless of the fact that operationally speaking, in many cases, the parties, or at least the party leaders, when it comes to votes and policies, they agree on a lot. I mean, this is the thing that's hilarious to me is you see these. Yeah, I think what was it? Chris Wallace or one of the moderators said, the parties really disagree on, there's so many things the parties disagree on, and actually there are
Right.
not that many things that the parties disagree on. Like there just aren't. I mean, the parties do not disagree basically in any kind of deep fundamental way, and I'm talking about the core of the parties here. They do not really fundamentally disagree on defense spending. They do not really fundamentally disagree on America's war posture in the world. They do not fundamentally disagree on issues like surveillance. They do not fundamentally disagree on what you might call corporate subsidies, the subsidization of private industry and private corporations. And that's a huge set of issues. They do not fundamentally disagree in any kind of really major way on taxes. I mean, there are some disputes on specific taxes, and but in terms of genuine structural taxation issues, there's not a fundamental disagreement. There's not really a fundamental disagreement on free trade among the party leadership. That may be changing. I'll
Yeah.
throw that out there. I mean, these things are all fluid. I think there are some disagreements on healthcare, but on we tend to think that there are these disagreements because the media defines stories, political stories and narratives as only those issues in which the parties disagree. That it's not really a story when there's a Senate vote that's 97-3. That doesn't tend to be a big story because there's no conflict there, even if the policy itself is absolutely enormous. So I think that in lieu of many major policy disputes, tribalism has taken over, where it's basically just about power. It's just two factions that agree on lots of things and maybe have some disagreements. They magnify the relatively few disagreements in what is really not a battle over policy, but is a battle purely over tribal power. And I think what's changed is that maybe it's always been that way among the actual individuals in power, the senators, the congresspeople, the president, the party officials. What's changed, I think, is that tribal attitude has become the activist attitude. That is a difference. That the motivating force at the activist grassroots level has been inflected with a kind of tribal, my party or the highway, or you're with us or you're against us, regardless of what policy we're even discussing, at the activist level. That you can actually, I'll give you an example that sticks out to me in the presidential campaign. Trump has been pretty, I would say, articulating the same themes that many principled progressives have articulated on the issue of trade and on the issue of Social Security. He has been more articulate about the problems of NAFTA than most Democrats. He sounds more like Bernie Sanders than anybody else when he talks about that issue. Now, you can say it's not genuine, but just let's go rhetorically.
Yeah.
He has been the only Republican that I can remember in my whole lifetime who gave a speech saying, we cannot cut Social Security. It cannot be touched. Like, absolutely not. We shouldn't even talk about, privatization. And you haven't seen at the activist level or even among kind of left publications any recognition of that at all. I mean, you haven't seen that in the AFL-CIO. If it was a principled organization, it could say, look, we're still with Hillary Clinton because there's all these other issues that we agree with, believe in. But you know what? This is a big deal that a Republican presidential candidate is articulating the same things that we've articulated on the issue of trade. You haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Because at the activist level, or at the the sort of the level of the groups that are supposed to be based on principle, they too are now inflected with this tribal sense of you're either with my party or against. So you've got the AFL-CIO bashing Trump on trade, even as Trump is articulating the AFL-CIO's basically their rhetorical position on trade. You've got the AFL-CIO purely prioritizing a kind of partisan argument. And I'm not saying that I don't understand the calculation. They're making a power calculation, but the problem is that if you strip out the principle from the groups, from the activists that are supposed to be the players in politics that are based on principle, they're not supposed to be like the politician who's just in it for power, then you've debased the whole process in a way that makes it even more difficult to have honest, principled arguments about actual policy.
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing this up and laying it out so clearly, because this is what I've been trying to explain. And I like that you're also making the distinction. Trump may not be genuine in what he's saying, which is my biggest issue with him. I don't know what his moral center is. But if we're to just go off what he's saying, the irony here is that he doesn't want a nation build, so he's really crushed the neocon movement. A lot of the neocons are going to go with Hillary, right? He also completely annihilated the Christian conservatives who are still supporting. They're like his main supporters at this point, but we know he's not a real supporter of the Christian conservative movement or their values. And then you take Social Security. So a lot of the things, in a weird way, he's the most moderate Republican there is, where if we could have ended up with a Rubio who would have probably been for far more foreign policy adventures, or Cruz who would have been more in bed with the Christian conservatives. So again, we don't know, because we don't know the truth place with Trump.
Well, here's the thing. I start from the position that I assume that almost every politician is purely an opportunist seeking power, and that they will change their position at any time if it's better for them for power. That even principled politicians, in a lot of cases, they have a more defined view of what their opportunity for power is, and that sticking to a principle actually is their opportunity. I mean, I realize it's a very cynical view. So what I am discussing here is not, is Trump genuine or not genuine? Does he really mean it? Would he really be for Social Security? Would he cut it if he was president? I mean, I have no idea, because he's an opportunity. He'll change. I have every confidence that he would change his belief system and position at any time because if he saw an opportunity, and that, just like I believe that about most politicians. The point is that there are supposed to be actors in politics, power players in politics, and certainly activists in politics, who do not subscribe to the ends justify the means purely for tribal power. That I would like to believe, and I don't want to idealize the past, but there used to be at the activist and nonprofit, NGO, political activist group level, the focus was, we are going to advocate for this set of policies, regardless of which party is for or against this set of policies. And if we have allies in both parties, that's great. If somebody's saying, on A, B, and C issue that we don't care about, or that we're not organized to, our group is focused not on A, B, and C, that person may be terrible on those issues, but if they're good on, X, Y, and Z that are our issues, we're going to actually try to build, legislative or policy bridges to them, that where the principle is the organizing force. There are supposed to be power players in politics and at the activist level where that is the priority. And I think that what has changed is that there is less of that now, that the activist space has become more adhering to the power for power's sake.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. The ends justify the means thing sort of brings me back to where we're at with Obamacare right now, where we're seeing now these double-digit rate increases. And it reminds me of when this was all happening and Obama said, you know, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan, even though it later came out that he knew that wasn't going to be the case. So he was clearly doing the ends justify the means. I want to pass this thing, so I have to lie to do it. I personally, and I suspect you too, you're not really an ends justify the means person, and that is really what sort of, it rots the underpinning of everything else, because then it's like you just don't believe any of this. I think that's what is really fueling the Trump thing. People simply don't believe anything, and this will be a good segue to talk about the media a little bit, which you give them some shit too, which is nice. Who do you believe at this point? Because I flick this stuff all day long and I go, I mean, this one's a bullshit artist, this one's married to that politician, this one ran his campaign, this one's on the payroll for that campaign. I mean, the whole thing just is a circus.
Well, look, here's how I read the news. I mean, who do I believe? I mean, one, I tend to read a lot of the business press because the business press is written for people who are trying to make money. And so the business press, in some ways, has less tolerance for bullshit than other parts of the press. That if your subscriber base needs you to be accurate in order to make investments, in order to make money, then that subscriber base has no use for gossip and stuff that's not important, then arguably it's going to be sort of a more just the facts, ma'am, kind of reporting. So I rely on it's not to say that there's not problems with the business press. I mean, the business press gets, you know, they have a little bit of a, you know, they sort of worshiping their own, they're captive, worshiping their own sources and the like. But
sure.
I read the business press. It's not that I don't, you know, I'm not one of these people who 100% trust much of anything. But this is the kind of, you know, I kind of have a portfolio of things to try to get at closer to the truth. So I rely on that. In the political space, look, it's very hard to trust anything you're reading that is not document-based, because stories that are not based on hard documents already can tend to be subjective. If I go out and I go to a Trump rally, and I'm going to talk to 10, or a Clinton rally, and I'm going to talk to 10 random people. I may have talked to 10 really weird people. I may have talked to 10 really representative people. And the story I tell is of either rally is, in a sense, inherently subjective, because I didn't talk to all 10,000 people there. And there's no real way to do that. So what I tend to trust the most are stories that are based on indisputable facts, indisputable documents, things that people, we know they've said, or we know they've done, or actions that they've taken that can be demonstrably proven. To me, that's a way to at least get to a part of the truth. And frankly, there's not a lot of that out there, especially in the political arena. There's not a lot of that out there because that's a lot harder to do. It is a lot harder. It takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more patience. It takes a lot more work to do stories that actually dig up documents, indisputable facts. I mean, digging up, sources who provide, sort of tangible evidence of things. That is a lot harder to do, and we have a media environment that basically rewards hot takes, that basically rewards anything that's so-called, clickable. And so, in a certain economic perspective, we've got a journalism business that, when faced with, hey, somebody can write, take an hour and write a hot take that's just their opinion on something, or somebody needs to take 2 weeks to find, this or that document that shows us where a politician may be on an issue that affects millions of people, a somewhat esoteric issue. The business model will say, have that reporter spend the hour doing that. Don't have them go, spend the time and energy to really do the hard work of real reporting. And so we are immersed in an ocean of of not only I would say a lot of vapid political content, but political content that in a sense you can't trust. You can't trust it because a lot of it is not based on anything that is objective, indisputably, tangibly true.
Right.
It is a lot of subjectivity. That's not to say that all subjective writing is not true, but it is to say that it's harder to trust something when somebody is basically saying, here's my opinion, and here's my analysis, and here's my view, versus here's the document in which that public official said this or did this, and you can argue that I'm not presenting it right, or I'm presenting it in the wrong light. But here is the document.
Right.
That is the most powerful form of truth that is out there.
Right, and I can say firsthand, I know that everyone's chasing the clicks and the money and things like that because look, the way we do this, we spend our whole first half hour talking about money and politics. I know just because of the YouTube algorithm, talking about money and politics, it's gonna, depress our views. Had we spent, a half hour talking Trump grabbing pussy with David Sirota, you're gonna get a lot of views. So everyone, does what they have to do. But I think that's an interesting point you're making about actual documents. So when it comes to WikiLeaks, as far as I've seen, the Democrats are trying to say that that Putin is involved with Trump doing this, which I don't see any direct evidence of, or that that Trump, or that Assange basically wants Trump to be president. It's a lot of conspiracy stuff. But as far as the documents, as you're saying, the actual written stuff, is there any evidence that any of it is not true that you know of? Because that's another point that people keep saying, well, that some of it could be forged and blah, blah, blah. I don't see any evidence of it, and I haven't been able to come up with it.
I haven't seen any evidence of it. I know that the Clinton folks want the questions to be out there, and this is what they're good at. I mean, you want to talk about the Clinton machine, Clinton aides. What are they really, really good at? They're very good at taking major, big issues and turning them into small, esoteric, tribal fights. They take the big and turn it into something small. So the big in this is, here are all of these documents exposing major policy preferences and political issues that can affect millions and millions of people. And let's turn it into this much smaller fight for cable TV chat shows about, well, the Russians released it, or they didn't release it, or they're behind it, and some of it's not real. And so we're not actually talking about the actual big stuff. We're talking about the very sort of in terms of importance. We're talking about the relatively small. I'm not saying the small stuff. I'm not saying that if the Russians were involved, that's small. But what I'm saying is,
right,
we're not talking about the issues that affect millions and millions of people.
Right.
And
we're not talking about the
design.
content of the stuff.
Right. We're not. That's what they don't want to talk about. And so what they've been really good at doing is, I think they recognize that they can't go out and say these are not authentic. I mean, I've seen one. Her pollster was on TV and sort of more explicitly suggested that. But for the most part, the Clinton team hasn't said, these are really not authentic. The officials around Hillary Clinton have not said that. But
there's been a subtle hint of that, though, I think, constantly. Yeah.
Right. They know they can't go out and explicitly say that.
Right.
But they want to have questions about the authenticity bubble and percolate out there. And you see, and in some ways their tactic is working. You see it, on Twitter, on Facebook. How do we know these documents are authentic? And my answer to that is, look, as a reporter, it's always hard to kind of prove a negative. Are all 10 zillion emails authentic? I mean, I haven't gone through all of them.
Right.
But here's what I know: that if one of those documents could be demonstrably proven to be not authentic, there are plenty of politically powerful, well-resourced political actors out there who would make that very clear and very, very public. The fact that has not happened is really an indication that these are almost certainly authentic, because the Clinton campaign, if they found one email that they could prove was not authentic, which if there was a forged email, it really wouldn't be that hard.
Right.
Then all they would need is one, and that would be it. Like then all the questions would just burst out there, and all of the documents would be called into question.
Do you think the biggest risk related to WikiLeaks is the one thing that it seems to me nobody's really talking about? Now, I've said as far as WikiLeaks, you have to view it with a skeptical eye because obviously there is a political agenda. The way they're releasing this stuff as it gets closer and closer to the election, there's some political agenda they have. Is it coordinated with Trump? As you'd say, I have no evidence of that, but okay. To me, the biggest risk of WikiLeaks is not that we're going to get all of it before the election, but that potentially Hillary could win, and they've really got some stuff that they saved to either release after the election, which would be a massive blow to our democracy, or that they could potentially blackmail her with. Now, I don't like going down the conspiracy route. I know there's plenty of that on YouTube, but do you think that's a legitimate concern? Because I pretty much am seeing nobody discuss that, and I think it could be possibly the biggest issue here, that they've got some bombshell that they're just going to hold for their own purposes, maybe to ultimately use her, and then she'll have to go. She'll have to go to war or wag the dog.
I haven't really thought through it. Like Assange wants, X, Y, and Z. Is he going to, hold some document and try to get her to provide asylum or something like that? I mean, I've been focused more on the contents of the documents. I mean, I think, the idea that something would be held until after the election that would have been germane to the election. Look, that's already happened, right? I mean, with the if the emails had come out, or if Clinton's team had released the Wall Street speeches, there's an argument that says that the Democratic primary turns out completely differently. Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely think that the Clinton team has proven ends justify the means, in the sense that if something bad or politically inconvenient comes out after we've already secured power, where what has been revealed is not a threat to us, I haven't seen any evidence that that things can then be resuscitated to become then politically problematic once that political hurdle has been jumped. In other words, something that may have been problematic that it had to come out in the Democratic primary has not proven to be particularly problematic in a political sense and in an electoral sense for Clinton in the general election. Now, there's you could say, well, the media's blacked out WikiLeaks, and I mean, I said yesterday, I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, you want to talk about sort of death of journalism stuff. The New York Times, 2 full pages on Donald Trump's tweets. Now, just republishing his tweets. That happened a couple of days ago. And I'm not saying that, I'm not even going to make a value judgment on that. Maybe that is legitimate. Here's everybody he's insulted. But where are the 2 full pages on all of the policy revelations about policies that affect millions of people that were in the WikiLeaks emails? Where is the Times 2 full pages on that?
Could it be perhaps that they don't want to out their own friendlies that are in the WikiLeaks, as we can?
Well, I think there's that, right? I mean, I think a lot of
that work at the New York Times.
Yeah, I think there's the media is uncomfortable because it does expose the WikiLeaks stuff, exposes that. But I also think it's like this calculation that readers care about kind of salacious and insulting tweets, and maybe won't care about the ins and outs of Hillary Clinton's telling Wall Street how she feels about regulation, which I think is both condescending to readers, and that's a benefit of the doubt kind of view. And I think there's also that the media doesn't view what is in these documents on a policy level as particularly problematic. And that's the real disconnect here, is that you've seen a lot of the reaction to the WikiLeaks documents be, well, there's nothing new here, there's not a lot of news, we know she's friendly with Wall Street. But I would argue, that may be all normal and fine and not news to people who operate in the elite political class, but it is newsy and noteworthy and important for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of readers who that is not normal for. That is a revelation. I mean, I do a lot of reporting on pensions, and I hear all the time, we'll do pensions and investments and how Wall Streeters is grabbing pension money, and you'll talk to people on the inside of the industry and say, well, that's not really news. I mean, that's happening all the time. And then we publish our story, and regular readers are like, oh, I had never heard of that. I had no idea that was going on. And I think that the elite media exists in its own bubble, where it is deciding what's news and what's not news based on a very insulated elite bubble perspective that is not the same perspective as its potential readership out there.
Yeah, and then when you add to that there obviously is some, or at least in my opinion, there's some political element that the New York Times, if Trump's emails had been hacked, they'd be all over the front page of the New York Times. So they might have some political allegiance.
But take it further.
Yeah.
I mean, take it even further. I mean, this is where it gets really depressing, is that if it was Trump's emails, the same groups, the same left, liberal, progressive groups that are saying, hey, nothing to see here, not anything, there's nothing interesting here, would be all
over it. Yeah.
And that speaks to what we talked about before, which is that there's a lot at the activist kind of nonprofit level. It has now also become a tribal view as opposed to a principled view.
Yeah. Listen, David, I wish we had more time, because you really, I mean, people, the number one question I get asked is, who do you trust? Who's calling out both sides? And I consistently tell people you, so that I hope that everyone will follow you. It's at David Sirota on Twitter, and I suspect your work is just cut out for you. It's just at the beginnings again, because this thing's only going to get crazier. So thanks so much for doing this.